Hello and welcome to the open world of Warcraft, where we are 100% focused on open world PvE content in the world of Warcraft. Things like leveling, world quest, delves. My name is Setsuko, and in this video what I want to do is take a look at the Paladin class talent tree, go through the different talents, offer an opinion on them, whether I think you definitely should take them, whether you should skip them, etc. Just so you can kind of get a feel for what this tree looks like when it comes to open world content. So we're going to start off by taking a look at our starter talents for each of the different specializations. When it comes to Paladin, each specialization does kind of have its own distinct playstyle. You don't really have to like roll into one or the other for like the tank or the healing builds, which is pretty nice. So starting with the Protection Paladin, we are going to have Lay on Hands, which is a 10-minute cooldown ability that heals a friendly target basically to 100% of their maximum health. Now, this does give the target forbearance, which prevents other forbearance abilities from being activated on them at the same time. This is a nice ability to just kind of pull yourself back up to 100% health if you're getting low. But honestly, as a Protection Paladin, that should not be happening. So like, it's great that we have it, but we won't really use it that much. And we also have Auras of the Resolute, which gives us Concentration Aura and Devotion Aura. Concentration Aura makes interrupt and silence effects shorter, which we don't really care too much about. But Devotion Order gives us 3% damage reduction. So generally speaking, that's going to be the aura that we have active on a regular basis as a Protection Paladin. When we get into the Retribution Paladin, so now we are getting Blessing of Freedom. So this will bless a party or raid member, giving them immunity to movement and pairing effects. Not really like a big deal, but we can pair it with a talent later on, which I like. That gives us a little bit more movement speed, which as a Paladin, we don't have a lot of that. So in my opinion, getting Blessing of Freedom is a mandatory pickup for every single class here. And then they also have access to, for every single specialization. They also have access to Hammer of Wrath. So Hammer of Wrath is kind of like an execute ability here. It is going to strike an enemy, deal a bunch of damage, and it's only usable on enemies that have less than 20% health. This is going to be a mandatory pickup for every single specialization as well. And then for Holy Paladin, we have the same as Protection with Lay on Hands and with our Auras of the Resolute. Now, in my opinion, the auras here are not a mandatory pickup, but if you have a spare point and you can get that Devotion Armor, just having a constant 3% damage reduction is nice. Of course, the only instance for that would be on the Retribution Paladin. So if you got a point and you need to put it in, that's not a bad pickup. All right, so let's take a look at the rest of these. We've covered all the ones on the top here. So again, Lay on Hands. That one to me is one that I would pick up on Retribution Paladin and probably skip on Holy Paladin, because again, you should have plenty of healing and sustain. But Retribution Paladin, you might want to have that kind of oh crap button just in case you get in over your head. So Blessing of Freedom, mandatory pickup for all specs, and Hammer of Wrath, mandatory pickup for all specs. Next, we have Cleanse Toxins. This is a pretty easy skip for every specialization. This cleanses poisons and diseases, generally open world content. There's not going to be any of those that are so bad that you're going to want to spend a talent point on them. Maybe if you're running a particular dungeon or delve or something like that, where, you know, this is an issue, you could pick it up, but in general, skip. Next, we have Obduracy. This says speed increased by 2% and damage taken from area of effect attacks reduced by 2%. We're going to have Blessing of Freedom already, so we might as well pick this up. That 2% increased speed is just really nice, okay? You're very slow on a Paladin. You don't have a lot of options. You might as well pick it up. Next, we have Crusader Aura. So this one is going to increase mounted speed by 20% for all party and raid members. This is a nice aura to pick up, but definitely not mandatory. I would say if you are on Protection or Holy and you already have Auras of the Resolute, you could probably skip this. If you're on Retribution, then you're going to want to get Crusader Aura or Auras of the Resolute. You're going to want to have one or the other, potentially, so that you just have an aura active. And generally, I would probably go with the Devotion Aura. The mount speed is nice, but it's definitely not essential, especially with the new sort of writing format that we're going to have all throughout leveling in the War Within. And then finally, we have Turn Evil. Turn Evil will basically cause fear in an undead, aberration, or demon. You know, you could take this if you're in an area that has those kinds of enemies, but in general, this is a pretty easy skip for me for all specializations. Moving on to the next row, we got Fist of Justice. Each holy power, which is our one of our resources that you spend, reduces the cooldown of Hammer of Justice by 1 second. Hammer of Justice is our stun ability. It's really nice to have in general on a Paladin. This isn't a mandatory pickup by any means, but it can be nice to have if you like to use the stun, or if you have a certain build that works off of stunning enemies. So this one, to me, just kind of depends on your build and depends on where you want to spend your points. Next, we have Divine Steed. This is a mandatory pickup on every single specialization. This is pretty much your only halfway decent movement ability here. It's a 45-second recharge ability that puts you on your horse or whatever animal you have as a charger for 3 seconds, and it increases your movement speed by 100%. Okay, you can use this indoors and you can use it in combat. Then we have Greater Judgment. So Judgment, an ability that all 3 specializations use on a regular basis, will cause the target to take 40% increased damage from your next holy power ability, and you can stack this up. So this to me is a mandatory for all 3 specializations because you're going to be using Judgment and you're just getting a nice big damage boost from an ability when you do so. Moving on to the next row here, we have a choice between Repentance or Blinding Light. So Repentance will force a target to meditate for 1 minute. It's usable against humanoids, demons, undead, dragon, and giants, and has a 15-second cooldown. Blinding Light is a 1.5-minute cooldown that will blind targets within 10 yards, making them wander around for 6 seconds. Again, this is a pretty easy skip for me for all specializations, unless for some reason you just did want an extra crowd control ability, in which case I would pick up Blinding Light because it's universally applicable and it attacks or affects multiple enemies at the same time. Next, we have Cavalier. This is a mandatory pickup for all specializations. It gives you an extra charge of Divine Steed, your movement ability, which is absolutely huge. Another mandatory pickup is Seasoned Warhorse. This increases the duration of Divine Steed by 2 seconds, boosting it up to 5 seconds, which is almost double the time that it's normally there, and you're going to get a lot more movement a lot quicker if you have these 2 here. Next, another mandatory pickup for all specs is Rebuke. This is our interrupt ability. So 15-second cooldown, interrupts spell cast, and prevents spells in that school from being cast for 3 seconds. You're going to use this all the time, especially when you are the only target for all the spells that the enemy is casting. Moving on to our next row, we have Holy Aegis. Armor and critical strike chance increased. This has 2 points, so 4% for each. Mandatory pickup on all specializations. That 4% crit strike chance is huge. Also, pretty much all 3 specializations play in melee, so that armor is going to help with damage mitigation. Next up, we have Avenging Wrath. To me, this is basically a mandatory pickup on all specializations as well, because it is your primary DPS boosting ability. Okay, it's going to increase your damage and healing by 20% for 20 seconds. It's going to allow you to cast your Hammer of Wrath Execute on any target, and you can build more things into this ability through the specialization talent trees as well. So it's got a bit of a long cooldown for open world, but it's one of the only ways you have to kind of amp up your damage against like an elite or a rare spawn. So you'll want to pop that, you know, at the start of a fight with them. So pretty much a mandatory pickup here for all specializations. Next, we have Justification. Increase the damage of Judgment by 10%. To me, mandatory pickup. Use Judgment all the time. Punishment. Successfully interrupting an enemy with Rebuke will cast an extra ability for you. Again, you're going to use Rebuke all the time. It's got a low cooldown. Lots of enemies cast spells. This just gets you extra damage for hitting your Rebuke. So to me, mandatory pickup for all specializations. Next, we have Golden Path. Consecration heals you and 5 allies within it for a small amount every second. This is not a mandatory pickup, but it is a really nice, useful piece of sustain for your kit here. You are going to be in consecration on all 3 specializations as much as you possibly can be. So it really just is a good passive effect here. So unless you want to put those points somewhere else, I would highly recommend Golden Path, but I don't consider it to be mandatory. Blessing of Sacrifice is an easy skip for all specializations for me. This blesses another party member, reducing their damage taken, but making you take it instead, which again, if you're in open world content, there's a good chance that you're solo and you're not going to use this anyway. In the middle here, we have Sanctified Plates. So this does some different stuff depending on what spec you are, but pretty much for all of them, it's going to increase your armor and stamina and reduce the damage you take from area of effect attacks. This is just raw stats, and to me, they're very, very good. So armor and stamina and protection, armor and stamina in the other ones as well. So it's just going to make you tankier, which is nice. If you feel tanky enough, you could skip these. I could see skipping these on protection and possibly holy as well. If your healing is really good, your self-healing, I would definitely pick these up on retribution. Basically would consider them mandatory on retribution, and really, really good pickups on both protection and holy. Next, we have Blessing of Protection. So this will grant immunity to physical damage and harmful effects for 10 seconds to whoever you cast it on. It does cause forbearance, which is the same thing we get from Lay on Hands. And it shares a cooldown with Blessing of Spell Warding. In general, I don't pick this up. It's a 5-minute cooldown, and honestly, I should be using other forms of damage mitigation here. And if things really hit the fan, I do have Lay on Hands in most cases. So this one is just kind of up to you. If you feel like you need another defensive, you can pick it up. Personally, I don't find it to be very useful. Next, we have Unbound Freedom. So this is the talent I was talking about earlier that makes Blessing of Freedom increase your movement speed by 30%. And you get that bonus when you cast it on a friendly target as well. To me, this is a mandatory pickup for all specializations, which might sound kind of silly, but when your movement skills come down to 2 charges of Divine Steed, being able to use a Blessing of Freedom for a 30% boost as well goes a very long way to making you not feel so slow. And that's a huge issue on Paladins, so I highly recommend picking this one up. Then we have Shield of the Righteous, heals you and up to 4 nearby allies for 1% of your maximum health. On our Retribution Paladin, it's Divine Storm, and on Holy Paladin, it's Shield of the Righteous. Honestly, between this one and between Golden Path, I would rather have Golden Path because it's just constant healing all the time as opposed to when you're using an ability. You're going to use these abilities fairly often, so you will get a good amount of healing for them, but I just think that, you know, having the passive healing from the consecration is a little bit better. So definitely not mandatory, and I personally would take the Golden Path over Lightforged Blessing. Moving to our next row, we have Seal of Mercy. Golden Path will strike the lowest ally within an additional time for 100% of its effect. So basically what this does is it makes it so that your consecration will heal you twice every second for the time that you're in it. So not a mandatory pickup here, considering Golden Path is not one either. But if you're going to take Golden Path and you want to increase the healing of it, Seal of Mercy is a good way to go. Next, we have After Image. After you spend 20 Holy Power, your next Word of Glory echoes onto a nearby ally. Easy skip here. Again, we're assuming that you're playing solo, doing your world quest, solo delves, things like that, so this effectively does nothing. Then we have a choice node here that modifies our Blessing of Sacrifice, which again, I don't take Blessing of Sacrifice, so I don't recommend that you take either of these, but the first one gives us a cooldown reduction, which brings it down to a 1-minute cooldown, and the second one makes it so that the damage that it diverts is added to your next Judgment as bonus damage or your next Word of Glory as bonus healing. If you were to take Blessing of Sacrifice and you wanted to pick up one of these, I would go with Recompense to output even more damage, but again, I would skip both of these on all specs. Next, we have Unbreakable Spirit. This reduces the cooldown of your Divine Shield and Lay on Hands as well as an additional ability here, by 30%. So this is a nice pickup. It takes your lay on hands from a 10-minute cooldown to like a 6.5-ish minute cooldown. So it's available to you a little bit more. Plus there's a couple more defensive abilities here. So if you want that cooldown reduction, I think it's really nice. And also this leads into a talent we definitely want to pick up. So that essentially makes this mandatory in my book for all specializations because of what it leads to, not necessarily because of the talent itself. Then we have a boost of Blessing and Protection, which reduces the cooldown by 60 seconds, making it a 4-minute cooldown. Again, I don't pick this up, and I wouldn't pick this up either. And then we have Touch of Light. Your spells and abilities have a chance to cause your target to erupt in blinding light, dealing holy damage and or healing an ally for health. This one is one you can pick up. I think this is pretty much a mandatory on Holy Paladin because you're looking for every single way that you could possibly get more damage. It's optional for Protection and Retribution because you already have a good amount of damage coming out, but it's 1 point and it gives you some additional damage. So in general, I'd recommend picking this one up as well. All right, that's going to bring us to our next row, and I need to spend, there we go, spend another point to get us down here. So first up, we have Strength of Conviction. So while in your consecration, your Shield of the Righteous, or if you're in Retribution, it's going to be your, okay, it says Shield of the Righteous as well. And your Word of Glory have increased damage and healing. So pretty nice. I mean, if you're already going down this path and you've got points to spare, you could pick that up. Definitely not a mandatory one. It does stack twice to 20%, which is not an insignificant chunk. But I think you could still put those points somewhere else if you wanted to. Next, we have Judgment of Light. So Judgment causes the next 5 successful attacks against the target to heal the attacker. To get this, you have to take After Image, which again, I think is kind of useless. So in general, I'd pass here. You could also get there from Blessing and Sacrifice, but considering these talents here are ones that I would definitely skip, I don't worry too much about Judgment of Light either on any specialization. Then we have Seal of Might. This increases your mastery and, depending on your specialization, increases either your intellect or strength. You can put this in here twice, so 4% increased mastery, 4% increased strength for Protection and Retribution, 4% increased intellect for Holy. Mandatory pickup to me, just, you know, nice solid baseline stats there that you're going to be using. Then we have Divine Purpose, mandatory pickup for all 3 specializations. Your Holy Power spending abilities have a 15% chance to make your next Holy Power spending ability free and deal increased damage. Okay, so this is just free spenders, which is nice on every single specialization, doesn't matter which one it is. Then we have Seal of Alacrity. Your haste is increased and the judgment cooldown is reduced. We're going to be using judgment a lot. We're going to be using auto attacks a lot. I really, really like this. Basically, consider this mandatory for most of my builds, but you could skip it if you wanted to. You know, 1 second off of judgment, like it matters, but not too much. And 4% haste is also nice, but again, it's not a game breaker either. Then we have Incandescence. Each holy power you spend has a chance to cause your consecration to flare up, dealing holy damage to up to 5 enemies standing in it. So just to kind of recap here on this Seal of Alacrity. So for our Holy Paladin, I definitely consider this mandatory because you want to be able to judgment more. And you also want that increased haste for more DPS. And for Holy Paladin in particular, you need to eke out as much DPS as you can out of the talent tree. I would say that Incandescence is also mandatory for Holy Paladin for open world content because, again, you're just trying to get every single ounce of DPS that you can. This is decent for Retribution and Protection. Just depends on where you want to put your points and how many you have left. Faith's Armor, Shield of the Righteous grants bonus armor for 4.5 seconds, I believe. Okay, Word of Glory for Retribution and Word of Glory for Holy Paladin. This is fine. This is an optional point depending on how you feel. If you feel like you're pretty squishy and you need some additional armor when you cast your healing or your defensive ability, go ahead and pick it up. If you feel like you're doing fine, then I wouldn't worry about it. For Protection Paladin, I think this is a pretty easy skip. And then for Holy Paladin, this might be a skip as well if your build has good sustain. For Retribution Paladin, I would probably pick this up just because they tend to be a little bit on the squishier side. All right, that brings us to our capstones here. So we're going to look at these based on the column that we have here. So our first one is going to be of Dusk Dawn. So when you cast 3 holy power generating abilities, you gain Blessing of Dawn, which makes it so your next spender ability deals 20% increased damage or healing, and the effect can stack. Once you consume Blessing of Dawn by casting a spender, then you gain Blessing of Dusk. This reduces the damage that you take by 4%, and also causes some additional effects here as well. For 10 seconds. Really nice, just passive ability to have here. Most of your holy power spending abilities take 3 holy power anyway, so you're basically just getting 20% increased damage on all of your holy power spending abilities, which is really nice. And then while you are building back up to that, you've got damage reduction. Really, really nice, really good. Not mandatory, but highly recommended for all specializations. That will lead us into a choice node here, Seal of Order. So this will make it so Blessing of Dawn increases the damage by an additional 10%, and Blessing of Dusk increases your armor by 10%, and your holy power generating abilities cool down faster. So it takes that bonus we're getting from Dusk and Dawn and it just amplifies it. Or we can take Fading Light, so this will increase the damage and healing of your next ability by 10%, and Blessing of Dusk will cause your holy power generating abilities to grant an absorb shield for 20% of the damage or healing dealt. Out of the 2 of these here, I think I would take that absorb shield because it's always nice to just prevent damage rather than trying to heal it back up. So that's probably the one that I would go with here if you were going to go down this part of the tree. That brings us to the middle, Divine Toll. To me, this is a mandatory must pick up for every single specialization. It's just that good. If you are in Protection Specialization, this will cast Avenger Shield on up to 5 targets within 30 yards on a 1-minute cooldown. It also will generate 1 holy power per target hit. For Retribution, it's going to do the same thing with Judgment. And with Holy, it's going to do the same thing with Holy Shock. This is just a really good big burst option that you absolutely should have on all specializations. Then you get a choice node here. Divine Resonance makes it so that after you cast Divine Toll, you're going to instantly cast that same ability 3 times. So every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. This is okay. Generally, for open world content, I don't particularly love it. I would rather have Quickened Invocation, which reduces the cooldown on Divine Toll by 15 seconds, brings it from a minute to 45 seconds so I can use it more often. That's definitely, if you're going to get Divine Toll for open world content, I think Quickened Invocation is the mandatory must pick up for that one. And then that brings us over to Seal of the Crusader. Your auto attacks deal additional holy damage. Again, for Holy Paladin, we're picking this up 100%, mandatory, eking out every ounce of damage we can get. For Protection and Retribution, it just kind of depends on where you want to put your points. But if you do put your points into there, then you do get that bonus. And then the capstone here is your Hammer of Wrath, your execute ability. And then your Judgment deal additional damage and extend the duration of several various buffs that you have. Again, kind of nice, but what I find in open world content is, you know, if you're really dropping the Avenging Wrath buff and pumping things up and you're just kind of murdering stuff, then you tend to lose those buffs and the bonuses they would provide between groups of enemies because you're not sitting on one elite or rare spawn or raid boss or whatever and getting the full benefit of that. So to me, this is a fairly easy skip for most specializations here. And in general, what I would do is I would get Divine Toll with the cooldown reduction, And then with the points that I have left, you know, you could do Dusk and Dawn with a modification plus the 2 points in the auto attacks here, right? Just depending on the specialization. So you can kind of tweak things that way. But I definitely feel like you want a Divine Toll. You don't have to take the cooldown reduction here if you want to put that point somewhere else, but it is really valuable to me. So generally I will take it. All right, well, that is the Paladin class tree. Hopefully that's been helpful to you, and you've got an idea about some of these talents and the role they play in creating a Paladin build for open world content. If you enjoyed the video, throw a like on it, subscribe to support the channel, and share the video with someone that you think is going to be playing Paladin in World of Warcraft: The War Within. I appreciate you taking time to watch one of my videos, and I'll see you on the next one.